Okay, this is a depiction a lot of you may recognize. If we're just looking at the creature on the left, you'd think of this as some kind of weird rainbow dragon, multicolored or plumed serpent, which is what it's depicting. This is Quetzalcoatl, known by other names, reaching up into North America from South America. And there's something strange about that fact, too, as opposed to it being in North America and reaching south, as would be the indication of the whole Clovis idea that was presented and now has been shattered long ago. But people still live under that guise and many thoughts that they go along with. Now, this article here that we're about to go into is an attempted debunk of what is known about what was said to the first people coming to the New World by the people that were already living there and their experiences. And he wants to relate it into a different way. I understand that. Sometimes I read these articles. Rarely will I turn around and try to take it on in any way. But I feel compelled a little bit to do this. And so let's just get into it. First of all, I do want you to remember this platform idea, which looks very much like a ziggurat. In fact, it is, only they don't call them that. They call them pyramids. I mean, if you look at the pyramids, of course, they have a correlation with this, and people and cultures, which are very common. And people can see it whenever it's right over there and just around the hook of the Fertile Crescent that goes on. But there are pyramids in cultures all over the place. Greece has a pyramid which, by their own dating off of the Great Pyramid, predates it. And there was a couple of more, they say, there at the time. No, it's not no giant thing, but all the storms are formed in, and it lines up to Orion and all these things too. Done a video about it. The Guanches have them. They've been found all over the place, especially up in China, where again there are things that look more like this, or that pyramid with the chopped off top that you see with the all-knowing eye, the back of a dollar bill, and other places, which again heralds back to this same thing. This is a symbology that's not just questionable, but is correlated. People try to make an assumption saying, well, there is convergence. Since we're talking about snakes, I know a little bit about convergence, dealing with pets and things for all my life. And there are snakes which show convergence. There's a vine snake in the Congo, which is identical to a vine snake that's in the South American jungle. And it takes a herpetologist or somebody who really knows what the hell's going on to identify it. In fact, at Dallas World Aquarium, they had one of the versions here, and it's from the Amazon, because the whole exhibit's like an Amazon. It's beautiful too. You walk through it, it's like Gilligan's Island type of built up bamboo things and going through it, and they have little exhibits cut into the walls and places into it. It's incredible. You ought to see it. Watch a video of it. It's a great place to walk around through, and at top they give you a margarita, and you're pretty much done with it by the time you reach the bottom. Grab the stairs and go through again and have another margarita, and it's really a great zoo thing, and you don't have to worry about the weather. It's an indoor zoo, quite a few stories tall, and going into a basement area too, giant aquarium, so on. A lot of cool exhibits, but talking to one of the guys there that knew what the hell was going on and is a herpetologist, and he, after talking to him a while about the exhibits and this one, the vine snake in particular, he let me know how they really know that it's not the Congo version and da-da-da, and that it's the one it is that they imported it from South America. He kind of said it in jest, but he also said it in a way that lets you know that, man, it's real hard to tell. But also in the conversation, we talked about how they're not even really related at all, but over time ended up looking strikingly similar to each other. Well, when we look at things like dragons and winged serpents, and this winged sun disk concept that you see with all these sun worshipping people all around the world from ancient times, there's something conspicuous about it. I know the sun disk eventually gets pulled by horses and a chariot, and that's also showing something extremely important whenever it changes to something like that. But in all the cases before it, it had this idea. Like there are angel-looking people and all these little cultures with wings and what the hell's going on with that pine cone and things. We've done a bunch of videos about that. But this symbology of serpents, talked about in ancient Sumerian things and the deification of the way that it is, and that wasn't happening just then. It goes back, I believe, before Homo sapiens, perhaps. And this concept of deifying a snake, because it can be poisonous, it can do these things, and it sheds its skin and looks brand new, and man, they can live for a long, long time. You can not give them any food and trap them in a jar and come back years later, perhaps, and they might even still be alive. It's amazing. But it sheds its skin, and you're like, what? So, not to get into the whole idea of deification of snakes, for that would be one thing that you might understand as convergence having happened. But whenever the symbology gets to the point that it's pointing out other aspects, that gets a little conspicuous. Whenever they start flying and doing these other things, it gets more conspicuous. Whenever it's hooked up to a god that heralded in all of this knowledge and did all these things, and it's why you have what you have around you, that's a whole nother level. It starts to become a multiplied by the third power and things like that. One was to believe on the chances of A happening, it, 1 in 10, but it ain't 1 in 10. If one thought of the scenario of B happening, it would be 1 in 1,000, and it's not 1 in 1,000 in any way, shape, or form. It's everywhere. If one thought about the third scenario, it would actually be 1 in a million, and yet it's not 1 in a million. It's millions of it. It goes the other way. Starts to a point whenever you use science and their scientific method that Occam's razor comes into play, and though everybody tries to deny it in some fashion or form, there seems to be a connective from way back. And if you want to say it was well before the Indians even came into America, as they all had this going on, I go, okay, so now keep going. Keep going. How does this all connect? Well, to these people in South America, it connected to these weird white people that had beards. And if you want to say they kept it for 9,000 years after coming over or whatever, or now we find it predates that Clovis thing. In fact, it predates your ability to go across the land bridge that you even gave credit for at one time and tried to prove. Now we find at global maximum there was a whole lot more land exposed well before that, and there are people here. Now, near me in Galt, Texas, at least 18,000 years old, and these big spear points. People have identified, even the Smithsonian, for Christ's sake, tell you this is Solutrean type. And it's so unique in its form that this can't be convergence either. Then there are genetics like X haplogroup, and if you just look that up, wiki it, hell, it'll show you where they exist, and it's in North America, the eastern seaboard, and in the ancient Mediterranean. And that shows you something else. Last year I did a video that had clipped pictures and different tribes of Indians, and it was kind of a setup a little bit. But it showed you all these different Indians, and everybody watching that would pretty much go in the idea that those guys were all admixed, and some of those people were white people dressed up as Indians, like you can do at Six Flags for pictures and stuff, right? But none of them was. And there's such a variation, and that's what I was trying to show there too, is that these Hopi and Navajo, they don't look anything like these Arapaho type people and anything, and they're very much a different people going on. There wasn't just one big group of hippies like people try to give an idea. In fact, far from it. If you hear about the atrocities that are found out from these people, you'll find out why these people that were so proper back then thought these other people were so savage. But that's not what this video is about. But we might go into some little points that direct at that concept. But the concept I want to relay right there is that they weren't a unified people in any way, shape, or form. Much like Africa, it's not just one certain people. There's Sub-Saharan, it's Khoisan, and all these different people, Bantus and so on, variations on a theme that aren't one people either. In fact, the Pygmies and so on else, I mean, it gets quite varied. That's why they say there's so much genetic variance. They have that, and then you have the North African endemic Caucasians that were there, and Egyptians that are not really what they were before at one time, but they're different that are there too, and then the people that are in Horn of Africa that are mixed and so on, and so it's such a variation compared to other places. So make no mistake, this thing right here is a dragon, isn't it? Sure, there's stories about rainbow serpents and so on else, but that's a dragon. Well, he doesn't have wings and big claws and things. So this is the serpent form that can fly anyhow because it's a flying serpent. Just like the Chinese dragons aren't quite the same as an Indo-European dragon type or a Sumerian type that looks a little more like a giraffe and things on the walls, right? But yet, there they are. And then there's the old dragon of St. George and the things we think of when we talk nowadays about dragons and Lord of the Rings and this lizard with these bat wings and these concepts that go on that too. Breathes fire and does so and so. Do they all got to breathe fire? No. There's far and more connections enough than the fact of that. In fact, if you know dragon lore, only certain types of dragons would breathe fire or do this or do that. But ironically, that goes with the people that are torching and burning places versus people that are doing this or doing that. For first, they want cattle, but then they want virgins. We've been through this. But let's get into this. This is an apologetic type version of what probably really happened, or hell, since I've rambled so far, we're probably going to go two-parter. If it does, it's in your top left-hand corner. Let's whip that puppy. So the real story of the bearded god named Quetzalcoatl. Many myths have cropped up in the centuries since Columbus landed upon the shores of Hispaniola. Yeah, you know, the Spaniards and stuff. A lot of people don't even think about how that worked out, and part of America was owned by the French and yeah, it did. And they say America was this, and it's like, hey, we weren't even America then, but while some of these myths have come to be seen for what they are, many persist in the zeitgeist as fact. One such myth is that the Aztec believed that Hernan Cortez, the leader of the band of conquistadors, was in fact a reincarnated deity by the name of Quetzalcoatl. Well, now I've cursory looked over this thing here, and he's not going to mention Pizarro et al. Or others that have recanted this same idea, and he's going to try to give you an idea that it was planted. It can only go that way. Yeah, thinking through it, as a researcher, I've tried to find my way out of it. As many times as I've tried to find my way in, I try to find my way out. I can't find my way out, but he's going to try. Let's stick with him. Light your torch off mine. Let's continue. As the story goes, the Aztec believed in a white, bearded god named Quetzalcoatl who long ago had disappeared into the east. In fact, they pointed directly, yet so on. And also they pointed at stars and said they had to do with this and everything. And everybody goes, that's got to be people guiding themselves off the stars, but let's continue. Before he left, however, he promised to return. When Cortez and his crew, Spaniards, came ashore in Mexico in 1519, many thought they were the gods. Now, not to sound weird in a modern-day PC world, but you could understand somebody of this advanced knowledge and having their pop-pop guns and all that going on, how whenever they come onto a basically primitive people, how that could be done in such a way. For right now, if somebody flew down on a spaceship and was just a good notch ahead of us right now, as far as the spacemen, North American, Caucasian, whatever you want to go with, we would instantly, probably due to our skepticism and what we have been through recently, not thinking that they're gods, but they're probably something like Star Trek. But other people would probably say they were gods. It happens with a thing that some people call cargo cult whenever you go and meet an ancient people. And just to be honest and straightforward about all of this, these people that are living in the South American rainforest right now that you're familiar with somewhat, but we try to stay away, are primitives, still to this day, choosing to be, that's fine. And because of the way we feel about things in PC now, we realize that you shouldn't do that to people from what happened from slavery and all those things. So we're going to omit that idea. And, certain islands have been found that have primitives onto them, deep in Irian Jaya jungles and so on like that. People should be left alone. But they're also getting left behind. And once there is interaction, there's going to be more and more and more disease that they could snap real quick, like smallpox, and take them right out. Until we come up with some way of secretly smallpoxing, vaccining them without having interaction or something, what are we going to do? Come up and put them all to sleep and then run in and give them the vaccine and run away real quick and come up with this God idea that happened? If you think about it, modern people flying over in airplanes and so on, has anybody seen the movie The Gods Must Be Crazy? It wasn't too much long ago we can actually see this effect, where someone is radically so far advanced that other people think that they might be the gods and so on. When you look at the ancient Sumerian tales and they came down supposedly and had the plow and all these things that blew their minds, they're the gods. They say the Anunnaki came from heaven, do whatever, and they're there now, deified forever. Kind of goes with religion and everything else and the possibilities. Sure, some things get exaggerated over time, but if you were to take this concept and say that it's convergent somehow, you have to go back pretty damn far and say that it still pretty much came from the same place before they ever came over here, and that they had already been exposed to all these concepts, or they wouldn't have it themselves. Some people say that's a selfish thought. That's, look at it. Be logical. Not just Occam's razor. It gets extensive. He's going to minimalize it. Maybe in a little bit we'll get into something that shows you the breadth of it and its reality. So they thought they were gods when they first showed up. Well, when they marched inland and took them to the Aztec emperor's doorstep, he recognized who Cortez truly was, a pious man. Montezuma proclaimed Cortez was in fact Quetzalcoatl, come back himself, come to fulfill the prophecy. Then he graciously handed over the keys to his empire, the bearded white god. Well, there's not the keys to the city and everything but people look at this too and they think of it as being a radical, oh, well, that's weird. Make no mistake about it, if we said this was all happening in the Middle East and one person went afar and took over these other people and then they ended up giving him the key to the city effectively, oh, sure, it happened all the time. And that's just with slightly superior things. Whenever you look at something that's out of line this far, then you could understand how that happened easily. But the weird thing is that they had a whole mythology that went on with this, and they don't grow facial hair, but their god did. And they also said he was very, very light-skinned, like you. Were they just so freaking out? So if an alien came down and he's all bug-eyed and everything, would we start going, yeah, 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 like you? Is that what went on? Is that what you want to go with? Had they had a story the day before he showed up? I think it all shows definitely they did, and their connections and certain things that they have, even with their religion thing that's, oh man, it's kind of like Star Trek, and they come back and there's the blue whale and it still exists. Quetzalcoatl's going to come back and stuff and da-da-da one day, and I want you to still have this going on. Well, when he shows back up, they are literally murdering people and pulling out their beating hearts and all these things going on. He's like, what the hell are these people got going on? He kind of tried to stop it, but then they thought, no, you don't want to show up and then think you're God, and then you turn around and go, hey, everything you're doing is wrong. It would devastate people. Of course, they didn't know that smallpox was about to eat them like rampant anyhow, even if they left right now and just said, shh, we'll make it a cargo cult, sorry. People look at it nowadays and they try to put some kind of blame, and oh my God, you were, oh, you know, guilt for not being a primitive. Oh, that's got to be sad. For now, the people that are bitching aren't primitives anymore, and they're up in there in the conversation. And the heralds of civilization again. They said they inherited this crap. Yep, you want to make that somebody made that up to make themselves feel better about chickenpox or something? Doesn't wash too well. So you see this bearded serpent, and he's got red, white, and blue on his plumes and stuff going on. And make no mistake, that maybe look a little bit more like a Chinese dragon than a regular dragon that we think of. For he's not fat in his belly, doesn't have any claws, and I don't even see any wings. But he's a cloud dragon. He's floating around. He's doing that. What's that? Well, yeah, this cloud dragon kind of all hooks up to the much later concept of storm gods and things. That kind of works with that a little bit too. But God, I'm going to go out in left field if I don't stop it. So this tale has become so pervasive in the modern ethos that I even learned in my 9th grade world history class. Told by our teacher that this story was historical fact. I went on believing the myth for years. It wasn't until graduate school, when I became more interested in the history of the Atlantic world and the colonial societies it produced, that I learned that the story of a white bearded god named Quetzalcoatl was a myth. Well, okay, but pause for just a second here. So, if you're going to go with the concept that Jesus is kind of a myth of the ages, woo, or whatever, or that Moses is kind of a myth, or that all of the mythology you think of when I say mythology is a myth, and then you're going to say, well, these people had a myth too, but their myth was about blue-eyed bearded gods. We go, yeah, it was a myth, and we're tracking that myth, and we found this pretty strange myth here going on, but you just wanted to discount it by saying it's in mythology. I find that just a little strange, but I also understand what he's trying to do there. Lacuna. In this article, I'd like to explore this myth, examining why it's untrue, okay, and how it came about, why both European and indigenous people of post-conquest Mexico came to believe in it. But first, let's quickly delve into the history of the real Quetzalcoatl and his theological origins in Mesoamerica. I have a real strong feeling how he's going to go here. He's going to turn around and say, we took over the people. They were so primitive and naive, they believed in it. We planted this idea in them and turned around and they just started parroting it. The real Quetzalcoatl, the Plumed Serpent. The Plumed Serpent made his first appearance in the archaeological record over 2,000 years ago in the heartland of the Olmec civilization at a site known as La Venta, in the present-day state of Tabasco. Yeah, this is the hot sauce. Yeah, you got it. In Mexico, archaeologists discovered a carving of a snake sporting a beak and a feathered crest with birds, or Quetzal, in Nahuatl, the language of the Aztecs. On either side, under the Olmecs, La Venta found flourished from around 900 BC, so within 100 years they got it going on strong like popcorn out of nowhere. But that's all just push on past that. Somewhere between 300 and 200 BC. Credited as the mother of civilization in Mesoamerica, this Olmec society spread culture throughout the region, including their belief in the sacred serpent deity. So now he isn't going to tell you where these supposed Olmecs got any of this idea from. He's going to say they pop like popcorn and everybody got it from them. So you look at ancient traditions of it and they say, that, well, the Olmecs inherited this thing from who? Well, there was these cloud people and these other things and stuff. Oh, well, I've got to dismiss that, oh my gosh, because that just ruins it all if I'm going to turn around and say what he's trying to say. So let's look at this La Venta thing, and I've actually shown this picture before. So at the top there we see there's that dragon, and he has a crest and a plume, like little feathers around there. Doesn't have it going around the neck so much. Nothing like he's really flying, is it? But strangely, he's like a world serpent encompassing this whole thing going down below. What some people fail to see in this shot here, though, is it's kind of upside down. But let me get this out of the way and use a pointer or something. I'll use this. This right here is a boat, is a reed boat. It's upside down, but that's a reed boat. And it has the little chambers on top of it, and the guy there and everything. And we've seen this in the old world a whole bunch, looking exactly like this too, again. And not only do we have just a winged serpent, we have other things, reed boats and all these other things that connect all to it. Hey, Thor Heyerdahl came across and blah, blah, blah. Look how the end is kicked up real bad on this end, so on. Cross hatching, showing you that they know how it all works. Right, well, the Olmecs got here somehow. Oddly, we don't see any trace of them in North America. That doesn't confuse anybody, but then they turn around and they try to dismiss all these other things, and it's like, man, you're real selective on what you're picking and choosing here, ending up with a directive that says like this, whenever if you take it all together, it kind of says that. More so than this, we know that people used to take, like Hercules, and put on these massive lions and different things like that and headdresses. It's always a headdress. Of course, ancient Americans say, he's in a spaceship here and things and stuff. This is not one of the better ones for the spaceship guys, but notice there's that damn handbag too. Now you can call convergence again, but we're on like level 6. We agreed 1 in 3 could be 1 in a million. So I don't know what number we're supposed to be at now, but it's far too big to count. But that's nothing. That's nothing. This convergence idea, we're going to get into it much worse. So showing this concept and trying to debunk it whenever there's all this symbology showing you connective situations isn't the best thing in the world. Let's just go with that. And so this is the photo of La Venta Stela 19, earliest known representation of feathered serpent. Okay. The next great civilization that left signs of worshiping Quetzalcoatl was in Teotihuacan. While scholars do not who built the inhabited this magnificent ancient city, its people etched their reverence for Quetzalcoatl into stone. The site contains 3 large pyramids. What? The Pyramid of the Sun, the Citadel, and the Temple of the Feathered Serpent. Lacuna Matata. Built around 150 AD, the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, also known as the Temple of Quetzalcoatl, was the third largest pyramid in the city, made up of 7 tiers. Ding, ding. The facade of the pyramid swarms with carvings of snakes. The symbolism of Quetzalcoatl here is intriguing, and this is hooked up with ones where they say, well, on this certain day of the year, all of a sudden it looks like the snake where the sun and the shadows go, and he crawls down and does this thing and stuff. And let me just go back to it again. The people that are most related to these people now are these rainforest people that don't even put 2 stones on top of each other. And they sure as hell aren't marking out and delineating lines and special days of the year that cut anything whatsoever. If you don't think that's far apart, it could be as far apart as 40,000 years worth of evolution. For we can look at the other people that we're kind of talking about on the other side of the world from this and can find things reaching back to those dates. In fact, conspicuous things that go back much farther than that. I touch upon them quite a few times in my videos. I was going to put that both together. So he finds it contriving that there's the feathered serpent again. Archaeologists have argued that the ornate headdresses found on the serpents represent time. What? Oh yeah, he's not making a great case for himself, but time is not exclusive to anybody, for we're all going through it, but declamations of time that we have is conspicuous. This suggests the people of Teotihuacan gave Quetzalcoatl a role in the creation of a calendar, the role he would continue to play in later civilizations. Though Teotihuacan lay abandoned by 750 AD, it represents an important point in the evolution of Quetzalcoatl in Mesoamerican thought. Well, yeah, or a continuation. He calls it an evolution. And again, here we have something that almost looks like a jaguar monkey face type god, showing his teeth and the sun coming out of it. If you looked and thought about this as a clock face in some way and the petals going around it and counted, you might get a other set of conspicuous concepts. And then you look what's just behind that, and it's like a sunburst going around, and that has connections too, but he wants no one to know any of that or make any other connections, which he himself pointed out and then walked away from. By the time the Aztecs emerged on the scene in the 14th century, Mesoamerica, Quetzalcoatl had become an important god for many peoples of the region. And during the centuries of the Aztecs' rise to power, the god came to play a variety of roles in Aztec belief. So everybody's liking that religion type thing that these people had, and even though they're gone now, there's much reverence to all these people that built all this stuff, apparently, that they're saying they inherited, and they want them to come back. And then they start doing odd things to try to ensure that he comes back, which by the time they did show up and they thought that it was them, what is it, they killed 22,000 people in one day and a night. I'm sure the guy that was cutting people's chest open was like, I am tired. For one, they credited him with the creation of the universe. Oh, this doesn't make connections. Humanity, the calendar, and their most important crop, corn. When we look at corn and how it's been deviated and changed here, we can see someone with agriculture's got it going on, but we see that some people are really deviating the genetics, being able to mess with it to where it comes out more and more and more cool corn, but also there ends up being different kinds of corn. You know, the multicolored version of this, that, and the other. Today we always do this kind of corn that's all in Monsanto and so on. But ancient people genetics to say that Monsanto may have changed it a little bit, but those from what corn originally started out to what it is there now, before Monsanto, is a huge, vast difference. And think about it, you don't really think of it, but popping corn is vastly different than sweet corn, than this, than that. So the Aztecs also drew upon standing traditions that associated Quetzalcoatl with science, arts, and learning, as well as the planet Venus. And if this were not enough, he was also closely associated with rain. Now we can see some type of Anunnaki situation in these group of people, and they're crediting a one. He was the one, well, he was the leader, for he wasn't all alone, was he? Doesn't really seem it as much. In fact, later they show that it's not. We'll get into that here shortly. Where are we at? 35. Man, we're going to go to second part here at about 45, guys, but Lacuna. Despite the various role and deeds ascribed to Quetzalcoatl in Aztec theology, he was not the most important god worshipped in Teotihuacan, the capital of the Aztec Empire. Indeed, nowhere in the traditions of the Aztec or the Olmec, Toltec, or Maya, or numerous other cultures for that matter, did the Plumed Serpent god disappear, promising one day to return. Actually, that is what they said, and they still to this day say it. You can try to say, oh, they said he was going to try to see, and then when they showed up, I said, it's not the people showed up on the beach and said, I am da-da-da that I don't even know about because I've never met you before. It was the locals. It's well documented. I don't think you're doing much for yourself. Here's another. Is that a Chinese dragon? Is it a plumed serpent? Is it? Oh, there it is again. Lost in translation. How did this myth come about? Well, as with most historical phenomena, many events fed into the Cortez as Quetzalcoatl legend, he says. Like tributaries into a river, perhaps one of the first to occur chronologically was a simple matter of mistranslation. Oh, okay. When the Spaniards arrived in Mexican coast in 1519, they were complete unknown in the Mesoamerican world. Well, yeah, but then they had this mythology about this bearded people that they didn't know existed. You're going to go with that? Okay. Thus, as the Spanish made their way inland, the towns they passed and sometimes destroyed, oh, you got to throw that in there, and oh, bad man, had no idea what to call them. So they had no idea what to call them, so they're just going to say, I'm going to call you the god of we lost. You're going to go with that. That's not working too good here. In 16th century Mesoamerica, part of a person's identity was their city of origin or the social role they filled. Eventually, Nahuatl speakers denoted the Spaniards as Caxtelca, or people of Castile. Well, we know what castles are, and a caste system in Castile. In fact, the first experience of people meeting these people of the New World was that they already had a caste system going on too. In fact, they denote that Montezuma and these people were much lighter than the other ones, and it's not just sun exposure that's doing it, and we can definitely tell the difference between, like, say, a Spanish influenced person of Mexico today and then ones that aren't so much, and then the rainforest people, and you can see a gradient that goes on there. But apparently there was a gradient before. They even show it in their art and so on. He tells you about these Castile, but that was years in the future. For now, no one knew from whence the Spaniards had come, so could not label them in traditional fashion. Well, no, they did label in traditional fashion. They said, hey, you're that guy. If a white guy with a long beard looking like a hippie, dressed in nothing but a loincloth, or not really a loincloth, but just a wrapping around his parts, came floating down out of the sky, raising his hands out, people would instantly recognize who the hell they thought that's supposed to be right now. But you're saying whenever they had the same situation, not floating out of the sky, happened to them, and they said, you're saying, no, no, no. It's funny how people try to apologize for other people that are still saying, well, yes, yeah, yes. It seems, however, that many people in the region were impressed with Spaniards' guns and horses. Oh, yeah, and everything, armor and all the stuff that they had. It's like, wow. Like their ships and everything. They were like, dude. So you can think of a ship there just as like if you had a spaceship come land down today, because a boat's not going to impress anybody. We have some pretty badass ones. After all, nothing like this existed in Mexico at the time. No, they didn't really have any animals as beasts of burden they could ride or anything. Of course, if they were to the left right then, later you might find these centaur-looking horse people or something, and then you'd go, oh, that has no connect. What? Well, it did over here before, but that didn't happen. Let's just go on. After all, nothing like this existed in Mexico at the time. When the Spaniards recorded their interactions they had with the various peoples of central Mexico, they noted that these people called them Teotl. Inotl, Teotl can mean God, and this was the translation of the Spaniards latched onto. Let me tell you, he's really not doing too good at trying to denote this, but I can see where he's going to try to go, but I don't think he realizes he went too far with telling you too much. So he's going to go, oh, well, no, that can't take back even what you yourself have put on it, much less what I've added to it. So here's a picture somewhat of them coming through, and is this Cortez? And Cortez right here, and so on, and there's coming on. But see these dark and Indian people and very much primitives? You see that? But you can see these other people that aren't looking like that, but then the dark ones back here that are. In fact, you can denote the coloration. And this isn't just Spaniards right here. And this island with a castle on it, and the way that this settlement looks, and you can say that's adobe. Well, they didn't know how to paint more primitive looking appearances, and a 5-story building right there, and hey, here's that. Well, that's the Tower of Babel. Yeah, if I was to just kind of blur a couple of areas, I could get you to believe this is something painted about the Tower of Babel, right? And whenever they're here going around, they're going up into heaven, right? See? Well, what the hell's that got to do with it? You know, they're flying up into heaven all the way to the top of the thing. What's that got to do with it? Oh, is this comets? Is it? Let's just go on. He tells you, but Teotl had different meanings as well. As historian Matthew Restall explains, it could be combined with other words to qualify them as specifically godly or godlike, but is fine, fancy, large, powerful, and so on. Like a from the gods, godlike, incredible technology, woo woo woo, that all he's not doing too well. Again, we're about to go to part 3, but I'm going to finish this and be at not so reverent actions. Impressed by the horses and goods the Spanish brought with them, the people who met Cortez on his march inland surmised that the Europeans were important people and lacked any other way of distinguishing them in speech, used the word Teotl to denote this, which later Spaniard chroniclers misinterpreted as God. Really? You just said yourself that Teotl kind of means gods, and you can find it synonymously goes off of it, but you could say the same thing about godlike and reverent and things and holy and stuff like that that goes along with our current interpretation of it, and it's neither one is going to get you out of that idea, is it? So is there a picture right here? No, not for a little bit more. So we're going to stop at this picture, start right here in part 2. It's going to be in your top left hand corner. Click on it whenever it comes up there in just a second. Should be there now. And we'll go to part 2. Like, share, and subscribe, and enjoy here if you haven't been subscribed yet. And leave a comment if you would, or come back if you need to. Peace. See you there.